The Pinnacle restaurant was the kind of establishment where even the air felt expensive. Crystal chandeliers cascaded from 30-foot ceilings, while waitstaff in pressed white shirts and black vests moved with practiced precision across Italian marble floors. On the walls hung original artwork from names even the wealthy had to pretend to recognize. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered 40 stories below, like a carpet of stars unfurled beneath the feet of those who could afford to dine here. Sarah Mitchell navigated between tables with practiced grace despite the unfamiliar uniform and the watchful eyes of regular patrons. At 37, she possessed a quiet confidence that seemed at odds with her position as a waitress. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, revealing high cheekbones and intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing. Few would have guessed she held an MBA from Harvard and had once run a $500 million division of her father's company. "Your domaine La Flave Montrachet, sir." Sarah presented the wine bottle to an older gentleman in a tailored Armani suit who barely glanced at her before nodding his approval. As she poured with perfect technique, her eyes discreetly surveyed the restaurant, noting every detail for her report. 6 weeks undercover had revealed concerning patterns in the management of what was supposedly the flagship of her father's restaurant empire. The Mitchell Hospitality Group encompassed 37 high-end establishments across the country, but Pinnacle was the crown jewel personally selected by Michael Mitchell himself. A restaurant where a simple appetizer cost more than most people's daily wage, and reservations were booked months in advance by celebrities, politicians, and titans of industry. In the far corner of the restaurant, a group of men stood out like wolves among sheep. 8 members of the Thunder Road Motorcycle Club occupied a large round table in an alcove usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. Their leader, Jack Stone, sat with his back to the wall, surveying the room with the practiced vigilance of someone who had survived decades of street battles and rival gang wars. At 52, his face bore the weathered evidence of a hard life, his silver-streaked beard framing a jaw that seemed permanently clenched. The black leather vest he wore over a simple white t-shirt was adorned with patches telling the story of a man who had earned respect the hard way. To the casual observer, the bikers seemed comically out of place among Pinnacle's usual clientele, but the truth behind their presence was known to only a few. 20 years earlier, Michael Mitchell himself had been Thunder Road's president before trading his motorcycle for boardrooms, building a hospitality empire few knew was founded with money from decidedly less legitimate enterprises. Though he had walked away from the life, he maintained a connection to the club that had been his first true family, occasionally hosting its members at his flagship restaurant as a reminder of the blood brotherhood that had helped build his fortune. Sarah approached their table with professional courtesy. "Gentlemen, would you care for another round?" Jack's eyes met hers with a subtle glint of amusement. "That would be appreciated, miss." His voice carried the gravel of too many cigarettes and not enough sleep. The other men around the table nodded their thanks, though none spoke directly to her. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted suddenly as Richard Palmer, the restaurant's general manager, emerged from his office. At 45, Palmer cultivated the appearance of old money, though those who knew him were aware he had clawed his way up from nothing. His tailored Brooks Brothers suit and carefully manicured appearance masked a ruthlessness that had helped him rise through the ranks. The gold Rolex presidential watch on his wrist caught the light as he surveyed his domain with the smug satisfaction of someone who believed they had finally arrived. Thompson Palmer barked at the restaurant's longtime maitre d', a man who had served the establishment faithfully for 25 years. "Why are those people still at table 12? They finished their meal 30 minutes ago. We have a waiting list." "They ordered dessert and coffee, sir." Tom Wilson responded quietly, trying to maintain his dignity despite the public dressing down. At 53, Wilson had spent his entire adult life in the service industry, witnessing the gradual change in culture as old-school professionalism gave way to profit-driven efficiency. "Well, tell them to eat faster." Palmer's voice carried across the restaurant, causing several nearby diners to glance up from their meals with discomfort. "This isn't a coffee shop." Wilson nodded stiffly, returning to his post at the front of the restaurant. As he passed Sarah, he gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent communication between two professionals, witnessing the slow deterioration of standards they both valued. Sarah continued her rounds, refilling water glasses and attending to the needs of her assigned tables. Her training had been minimal, almost as if Palmer wanted her to fail. What he couldn't have known was that she had insisted on working in every position within the company during college summers, learning the business from the ground up at her father's insistence. "You can't lead what you don't understand," Michael had told her, and those words had shaped her entire approach to business. Across the room, Elena Martinez, a 24-year-old waitress with 3 years at Pinnacle, tried to make herself invisible as Palmer approached her section. The young woman's hands trembled slightly as she arranged silverware, her eyes darting nervously toward the manager. Sarah had noticed this pattern before, the fear that seemed to permeate the staff whenever Palmer was present. It was one of the reasons her father had finally agreed to her undercover assessment. The inciting incident occurred with the sudden violence that often characterizes true watershed moments in life. Sarah was serving a table of 4 investment bankers when she heard Palmer's voice rise to an unacceptable level. "You think you can just walk around here like you own the place?" His finger jabbed towards Sarah, who had momentarily paused at the coffee station. Every head in the vicinity turned to witness the confrontation as Palmer closed the distance between them, his face flushed with the peculiar rage of small men granted moderate power. The restaurant fell silent, as if someone had suddenly cut the background music. 60 patrons froze, silverware suspended between plate and mouth as the scene unfolded. At the Thunder Road table, Jack Stone straightened almost imperceptibly, his weathered hands coming to rest flat on the tablecloth. Sarah maintained perfect composure, her posture straight, but relaxed hands clasped in front of her, in a position that suggested professional deference but revealed nothing of her true identity. "Sir, I was simply getting coffee for table 14 before checking on my other guests." "When I'm speaking to you, you respond with proper respect." Palmer's voice carried across the restaurant, designed to humiliate and establish dominance in front of the assembled witnesses. "Do I need to remind you of basic service protocols?" Sarah's response came quietly, though every ear in the now silent restaurant could hear her clearly. "No, sir, that won't be necessary." Palmer's face flushed deeper at what he perceived as insufficient deference. "That's not how you address management. You will stand at attention when I'm speaking to you." Tom Wilson moved cautiously toward the unfolding scene, sensing the dangerous escalation. "Mr. Palmer, perhaps we could discuss this in your office." His suggestion carried the weight of someone who had witnessed similar incidents before and understood their potential consequences. "Stay out of this, Tom." Palmer never took his eyes off Sarah as he continued his public dressing down. "What appointment could a waitress like you possibly have that's more important than showing proper respect to management?" At table 7, an elderly couple exchanged uncomfortable glances, the woman whispering, "This isn't right," though neither moved to intervene. Palmer had a reputation for vicious retaliation against those who crossed him. Just 3 months early, Wilson had watched Palmer grab Martinez by the arm and berate her for a minor uniform discrepancy. The young woman had been too afraid to file a formal complaint. Sarah remained calm, her breathing steady despite the obvious tension in the room. "Sir, I understand your concern about protocol. Perhaps we could discuss this privately rather than disrupting the dining experience of our guests." Behind her composed exterior, Sarah Mitchell was methodically cataloging every detail of the confrontation for her report. This was exactly the kind of toxic management culture her father had sent her to evaluate. This was the evidence she needed to confirm the anonymous complaints that had finally reached Michael Mitchell's desk. Her suggestion only seemed to enrage Palmer further. "Don't you dare tell me how to handle staff discipline. You clearly need a lesson in respect, and everyone here needs to see what happens when proper authority is challenged." His hand moved towards Sarah's shoulder as if to physically demonstrate his point. What happened next occurred so quickly that many witnesses would later struggle to describe the exact sequence of events. Palmer's hand struck Sarah across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. The sound of the impact resonated through the suddenly silent restaurant like a gunshot. Several guests gasped audibly, while others froze in shock, unable to process the violent act they had just witnessed in one of Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishments. Sarah absorbed the blow without stepping backward, her hand rising slowly to touch the reddening mark on her cheek. When she looked back at Palmer, her expression remained remarkably composed, though something had changed in her eyes. Something that made several of the more observant patrons suddenly sit up straighter in their chairs. Years of executive boardroom battles had taught her to control her reactions, to assess threats with cold calculation rather than emotion. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the distant hum of kitchen ventilation and Palmer's heavy breathing as he stood over the woman he had just assaulted. His chest puffed out with the satisfaction of having established his dominance in front of an audience. The scrape of chairs from the corner broke the silence as all 8 members of Thunder Road rose in unison. Jack Stone's face remained impassive, but his eyes had taken on the cold focus of a predator. He moved with deliberate, unhurried steps across the restaurant, each bootfall echoing on the marble floor. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the seasoned biker approached the confrontation. Patrons shrank back in their seats, sensing the imminent collision of worlds that were never meant to intersect the polished veneer of high society about to meet the raw power of street justice. Sarah straightened her uniform jacket with deliberate precision, her movements controlled and purposeful. "Thank you for the demonstration, Mr. Palmer. I believe that will be sufficient for now." Her voice carried no trace of anger or fear, only a quiet certainty that made more than one observer wonder exactly who they had just watched get struck. Jack Stone reached the scene, positioning himself not between Sarah and Palmer, but slightly to the side, creating a triangle that subtly altered the power dynamic. He made no threatening gestures, offered no words, simply stood with the patient stillness of a man who had learned long ago that true power rarely needed to announce itself. Palmer faltered for the first time, noticing the tattooed forearms and weathered face of the biker, the patches on his leather vest that spoke of affiliations dangerous enough to give even the most arrogant man pause. "This doesn't concern you." Palmer attempted to dismiss Jack, though his voice had lost some of its previous authority. "I believe it does." Jack's response came in a voice so quiet diners at nearby tables had to lean forward to hear it. "When a man strikes a woman in my presence, it very much becomes my concern." Wilson had reached the small grouping now standing slightly behind Palmer, ready to intervene if the situation escalated further. "Mr. Palmer, sir, the Thunder Road members are personal guests of Mr. Mitchell. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private." At the mention of Michael Mitchell's name, Palmer's expression flickered briefly. Everyone in the company knew of the owner's mysterious past, though few were aware of the specific details of his connection to Thunder Road. In the kitchen, Elena Martinez was frantically typing on her phone, sending a message to the one person she believed might be able to help the former waitress who had shown her kindness years earlier, and who had quietly given her a private number with instructions to call if she ever witnessed something that crossed the line from difficult management to abuse. Staff Sergeant Tom Carter couldn't shake what he had witnessed in the mess hall. 23 years in the Corps had taught him to recognize when something was seriously wrong, and watching Captain Brennan strike that woman had triggered every alarm bell in his experienced mind. He found himself walking toward the base communications center, his pace quickening with each step. Wilson couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation was rapidly spiraling beyond his control. 25 years of service had taught him when something dangerous was unfolding, and watching Palmer strike Sarah had triggered every instinctive warning bell in his experienced mind. He found himself moving toward the house phone, his steps measured but purposeful. Palmer noticed the movement, interpreting it as Wilson abandoning his post. "Where do you think you're going? No one leaves the floor without permission." "Sir, I need to check on a reservation." The lie came smoothly to Wilson's lips after decades of diplomatic service. "That can wait. We're dealing with an insubordination issue here." Palmer turned his attention back to Sarah, who remained perfectly still, her posture neither challenging nor submissive. "As for you, you're fired. Collect your things and leave the premises immediately." The situation had reached a precarious balance point. Jack Stone stood motionless, his presence a silent threat, though he had made no overtly aggressive moves. The other Thunder Road members remained at their table, watching the confrontation with predatory focus, ready to move at their leader's signal. Palmer maintained his position, bolstered by his official authority, though increasingly aware that the dynamic had shifted in ways he didn't fully understand. In the kitchen, Wilson reached the house phone, dialing a number few at the restaurant knew existed. When the line connected, he spoke quickly in a low, urgent voice. "This is Wilson at Pinnacle. We have a situation involving Mr. Palmer and a female server. Physical contact has occurred." "Yes, sir. Thunder Road is present." He listened briefly before hanging up, his expression grim but resolute. Across Manhattan, in a penthouse office with panoramic views of Central Park, Michael Mitchell stared at the incoming text message on his private phone, his face growing increasingly pale with each word he read. The photograph attached matched exactly what the woman's security cameras had captured being struck by Richard Palmer in his flagship restaurant. Sarah Mitchell, his only daughter, the heir to his business empire, and the one person he had sworn to protect above all others, had been assaulted while conducting the undercover evaluation he had finally agreed to after months of her insistence. His hands trembled slightly as he touched the screen, not from fear, but from the effort of controlling a rage so profound it threatened to overwhelm his carefully cultivated business persona. Michael picked up his secure phone and dialed a number that would connect directly to Jack Stone, bypassing the restaurant's switchboard. When the line connected, he spoke with the crisp efficiency that had served him well in both his previous life and his current one. So, Jack, it's Michael. Don't let Palmer leave. I'll be there in 15. The voice that answered was equally economical. Understood, boss. Michael ended the call, then sat motionless for 30 seconds, allowing the tactical part of his mind to assess the situation and determine the optimal response. The businessman he had become counseled caution, legal considerations, damage control. The Thunder Road president he had once been demanded immediate and decisive action. He found himself balancing between these two aspects of his personality, searching for the response that would serve both justice and his long-term interests. Rising from his desk, Michael pressed the intercom. Elizabeth, have the car brought around immediately and contact our legal team. Tell them to meet me at Pinnacle in 30 minutes. Elizabeth Morgan had served as Michael Mitchell's personal attorney for 15 years, managing both his legitimate business affairs and the occasional situations that required more discreet handling. At 45, she had built a reputation as one of Manhattan's most formidable corporate lawyers, though few knew the full scope of her work for the Mitchell Hospitality Group. Yes, Mr. Mitchell, may I ask what's happened? Richard Palmer just physically assaulted Sarah during her undercover assessment. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Elizabeth was one of the few people aware of Sarah's true mission at Pinnacle. When she finally responded, her voice was that of a lawyer already preparing for battle. I'll bring the full team and the documentation from the other complaints. We'll meet you there. Back at Pinnacle, the standoff continued, though the power balance had shifted subtly. Jack Stone had positioned himself between Palmer and the exit, while the other Thunder Road members had spread out around the restaurant, taking positions that would allow them to control the space if necessary. Palmer, sensing the change, attempted to reassert his authority. This is ridiculous. I'm the general manager here. You can't prevent me from moving freely in my own restaurant. No one's preventing anything. Jack's response came with the deadly calm of a man who had faced far more dangerous situations. I'm simply enjoying the atmosphere. My friends and I have paid for our meal, and we're in no hurry to leave. Wilson returned to the floor, moving to Sarah's side. Miss Mitchell, would you like some ice for your cheek? The use of her last name sent a visible shock through Palmer's body. His eyes darted between Wilson and Sarah as the implications began to register. Mitchell, what are you talking about? Sarah maintained her composure, though a slight smile now played at the corners of her mouth. That won't be necessary, Tom, but thank you for your concern. What's going on here? Palmer demanded, his voice rising with the first notes of panic. Who is she? Wilson chose his words carefully, in knowing that the next few minutes would determine much about the future of the restaurant and his place in it. Mr. Palmer, perhaps we should continue this discussion in your office. Palmer's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Tell me who she is right now. The main doors of the restaurant swung open, drawing all eyes. A young woman in a business suit entered, carrying a laptop and legal documents. Behind her came two uniformed security officers wearing the Mitchell Hospitality Group insignia, followed by Elizabeth Morgan herself, her expression professionally neutral, though her eyes took in every detail of the scene with laser focus. Sarah stepped forward, for the first time taking control of the situation. Mr. Palmer, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm the Executive Vice President of Operations for Mitchell Hospitality Group and the daughter of Michael Mitchell. I've been conducting an assessment of Pinnacle for the past 6 weeks, following multiple reports of staff mistreatment, financial irregularities, and management concerns. The color drained from Palmer's face so rapidly that several observers thought he might collapse. His mouth opened and closed several times without producing any sound as the full implications of what had just occurred crashed down upon him. That's impossible. He finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. You're a waitress. You have no experience. You have only been here 6 weeks. Actually, Mr. Palmer, I worked my way through every position in my father's restaurants during my college years. I hold an MBA from Harvard, and until recently I ran our West Coast division. The decision to assess Pinnacle personally came after we received 17 separate complaints about your management style and financial practices over the past year. The restaurant had gone completely silent, every guest and staff member frozen in place as they witnessed what was clearly a seismic shift in power. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work peering through the service windows to observe the unfolding drama. Elizabeth Morgan stepped forward, extending her hand to Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell, are you all right? Do you require medical attention?" "I'm fine, Elizabeth, thank you. Just documenting everything for the report." Morgan turned her attention to Palmer, her professional demeanor masking the calculating legal mind that had already identified multiple actionable offenses. "Mr. Palmer, I'm Elizabeth Morgan, Chief Counsel for Mitchell Hospitality Group. I need to inform you that you've been recorded striking an executive of this company. That constitutes assault and battery under New York law, as well as multiple violations of your employment contract and company policy." Palmer's face had taken on the pallor of someone experiencing the sudden collapse of their entire professional world. "This is a setup. You can't do this. I have rights." "Yes, you do," Morgan agreed, "and will ensure those rights are respected during the termination process and any subsequent legal proceedings. However, given the severity of your actions and the substantial evidence we've gathered over the past 6 weeks, I must inform you that your employment with Mitchell Hospitality Group is terminated effective immediately." The security officers moved to flank Palmer as Morgan continued. "These officers will escort you to your office where you may collect your personal belongings under supervision. Your access to company systems has already been revoked, and you are henceforth barred from entering any Mitchell Hospitality Group property." Palmer looked wildly around the restaurant, seeking any ally or escape route, finding none. The Thunder Road members had effectively blocked all exits, while the staff he had terrorized for years watched with expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed satisfaction. The deep rumble of a powerful engine outside announced the arrival of another player. Through the restaurant's glass doors, 3 black Rolls-Royce Ghosts pulled to the curb, their midnight paint gleaming under the entrance lights like the carapace of some prehistoric predator. From the lead car emerged Michael Mitchell himself, his imposing 6'3" frame still powerful at 68, his silver hair and tailored Brioni suit marking him as a man of wealth and influence, while the intensity in his eyes revealed something else entirely, something that belonged to his previous life. The restaurant doors swung open as Michael entered, flanked by 2 men whose bearing suggested private security, but whose watchful eyes and subtle positioning spoke of more specialized training. He moved through the space with the confidence of someone who owned not just the building, but the very air within it, acknowledging his Thunder Road brothers with a subtle nod before his eyes found his daughter. The visible mark on Sarah's cheek caused a momentary flicker across Michael's composed features, a flash of something primal and dangerous quickly mastered, but not before several observers recognized it for what it was, the barely restrained fury of a father whose child had been harmed. "Sarah." His voice betrayed nothing of his inner turmoil. "I'm fine, Dad," she replied with the same control. "Everything is under control." Michael turned his attention to Palmer, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Mr. Palmer, we had such high hopes for you when we promoted you to general manager. I'm disappointed that you've chosen to betray that trust in such a spectacular fashion." "Mr. Mitchell, I can explain," Palmer began desperately. "I'm certain you can." Michael cut him off with a dismissive gesture. "And you'll have ample opportunity to do so with our legal team and possibly with the district attorney's office. However, at this moment, I'm not interested in your explanations." He turned to address the stunned restaurant guests, many of whom were surreptitiously filming the encounter with their phones. "Ladies and gentlemen, please accept my sincere apologies for this disruption to your dining experience. The Pinnacle has always prided itself on creating an atmosphere of elegance and respect. Clearly, we have fallen short of that standard today." With the practiced charm that had helped build his empire, Michael continued, "As a token of our regret, your meals tonight will be complimentary. Additionally, each of you will receive a personal invitation to return as my guests once we have restored Pinnacle to the standard of excellence you deserve." This unexpected gesture broke the tension in the room, generating a murmur of appreciation from the assembled diners. Michael had masterfully reframed the evening, transforming a potential public relations disaster into an example of gracious hospitality. Turning back to the matter at hand, Michael addressed the security officers. Please escort Mr. Palmer to his office to collect his belongings, then remove him from the premises. As Palmer was led away, Michael approached Jack Stone, extending his hand. Thank you for looking out for my daughter, old friend. Jack clasped his hand in the distinctive Thunder Road grip, a subtle acknowledgement of their shared history. Always boss, once family, always family. Michael nodded to the other club members before addressing Wilson. Tom, thank you for alerting us to the situation. Your loyalty won't be forgotten. Wilson straightened under the recognition. Just doing my job, sir. This restaurant means everything to me. I know it does, Michael replied, which is why I'd like you to serve as interim general manager until we can implement a more permanent solution. The shock on Wilson's face gave way to determined pride. I would be honored, sir. Michael finally turned his full attention to Sarah, gently touching her shoulder in a rare public display of affection. Let's talk in the office. As father and daughter walked toward the management suite, the restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though every conversation now centered on the extraordinary events they had just witnessed. The Thunder Road members returned to their table, maintaining a watchful presence, while Wilson moved through the space, reassuring guests and staff that order had been restored. In Palmer's office, now stripped of his nameplate, Michael closed the door behind them. For a moment, he simply looked at his daughter, the mark on her cheek still clearly visible. You were right, he finally admitted. There were serious problems here that I didn't want to see. Sarah nodded, accepting this rare acknowledgement. It's not just Pinnacle, Dad. From what I've gathered, similar issues exist throughout the organization. Palmer is a symptom, not the disease. I know. Michael sank into the leather chair behind the desk, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. I built this company from nothing, but somewhere along the way, I lost touch with what happens on the ground. That's why I wanted to do this assessment personally. Sarah sat across from him, their positions mirroring the countless business meetings they'd had over the years, though something fundamental had shifted between them. We need systematic change, not just a few firings. Michael studied his daughter, seeing in her the same determination that had driven him from the streets to the pinnacle of business success. You have a plan, I assume? Sarah smiled for the first time since the confrontation. I always have a plan, but first we need to address the immediate situation. Palmer has been abusing staff for years, and there are financial irregularities that suggest significant embezzlement. Elizabeth is already preparing the case, Michael confirmed, but legal consequences aren't enough. We need to send a message throughout the organization. I agree, Sarah leaned forward, her expression intense. And I know exactly how to do it. Outside in the restaurant, Jack Stone watched the office door, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. To the casual observer, he was simply a rough-looking man in a leather vest. But those who knew him understood that behind the facade was one of the most loyal and dangerous individuals in Michael Mitchell's orbit. As the night continued, Thunder Road maintained their presence, a silent reminder that some bonds transcended the artificial boundaries between worlds. The outsiders had become protectors, revealing that true strength often came from unexpected places. And somewhere in the glittering Manhattan night, a new chapter was beginning for the Mitchell Empire, one that would be written not in the language of power and dominance, but in the enduring values of respect, dignity, and justice. Palmer didn't realize that a single slap had triggered a chain of events that would end his career, change the entire restaurant group, and become a cautionary tale for every manager in the hospitality industry for decades to come. Richard Palmer sat alone in his office, staring at the personal items he'd been instructed to pack. The walls that had once displayed his numerous achievement awards now showed only the faded rectangles where frames had hung. His nameplate had already been removed from the door, as if the restaurant was eager to erase any evidence of his 16-year career. This is ridiculous, he muttered to himself as he placed a framed photo of his graduation from Cornell's hospitality program into a cardboard box. A complete overreaction to a minor disciplinary issue. The security officers stood silently by the door, their expressions revealing nothing. Palmer had tried engaging them in conversation, attempting to establish some form of alliance, but they remained professionally detached. These weren't the usual Pinnacle security staff he could intimidate or charm. These men had been dispatched directly from Mitchell, corporate headquarters, and answered only to Michael himself. Palmer's mind raced through potential defenses and explanations. Surely this was salvageable. He'd been a loyal employee for nearly 2 decades, rising from server to general manager through relentless work and strategic networking. The restaurant's profit margins had increased 30% under his leadership. Michael Mitchell was a businessman. He would understand that sometimes maintaining discipline required a firm hand. The Rolex Presidential glinted on his wrist as he checked the time. Nearly 40 minutes had passed since the confrontation on the restaurant floor. 40 minutes since his entire professional life had imploded. He unconsciously touched the diamond tie clip that had become his signature accessory, a symbol of the success he'd achieved despite his humble beginnings. The door opened and Elizabeth Morgan entered, her expression professionally neutral, though her eyes cataloged every detail of the office with practiced precision. Mr. Palmer, we need to discuss the terms of your separation from Mitchell Hospitality Group. Palmer straightened, attempting to reclaim some authority. There's been a misunderstanding. Once Mr. Mitchell reviews my record and contribution to this organization, he'll recognize this was an isolated incident in an otherwise exemplary career. Morgan placed her leather portfolio on the desk and opened it, revealing a stack of meticulously organized documents. This is not a negotiation, Mr. Palmer. Your employment has been terminated for cause effective immediately. These papers outline the legal implications of your actions today, as well as our findings from the 6-week investigation conducted by Ms. Mitchell. Investigation? This is absurd. I was simply maintaining standards with an underperforming employee. Morgan's expression didn't change, but her voice took on a subtle edge. The employee you assaulted was Executive Vice President Sarah Mitchell, conducting an authorized corporate assessment. That alone constitutes grounds for immediate termination. However, our investigation has uncovered numerous additional violations, including financial discrepancies, questionable vendor relationships, and a pattern of staff mistreatment. Palmer felt the first real tendrils of fear creeping up his spine. Financial discrepancies? What are you talking about? Over the past 3 years, approximately $2.4 million has been diverted from Pinnacle's accounts through a series of manipulated invoices, inflated vendor payments, and unreported cash transactions. Our forensic accountants have tracked these funds to several offshore accounts connected to shell companies registered in your sister's name. The color drained from Palmer's face. His careful system of skimming from the restaurant's enormous cash flow had been designed to stay just below the threshold of standard auditing practices. He'd been certain the complex web of transactions would be impossible to untangle, especially given the high volume of business Pinnacle conducted. Those accounts are authorized investment vehicles for restaurant expansion. Everything was approved by finance. The lie came automatically, though Palmer could hear the hollow desperation in his own voice. Morgan removed another document from her portfolio, sliding it across the desk. This is a preliminary report detailing each unauthorized transaction beginning in March 3 years ago. We've already shared this information with the appropriate authorities. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division has opened an investigation and will likely be contacting you within the next 48 hours. Palmer stared at the document, the carefully categorized list of transactions he'd believed were invisible, now laid bare in devastating detail. The systematic theft had started small, just $5,000, redirected through a falsified linen service invoice. But over time, as his confidence grew, so did the amounts, culminating in a recent diversion of nearly $200,000 disguised as renovations to the wine cellar. This is a mistake. His voice had lost its authoritative tone, replaced by the beginning notes of panic. I can explain each of these transactions. You'll have ample opportunity to do so with federal investigators. Morgan closed her portfolio with finality. As for your termination, the security team will escort you from the building once you've collected your personal belongings. Your final paycheck minus appropriate deductions for company property will be processed according to state law. Your company credit card, phone, and access credentials have already been deactivated. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. I should also inform you that Mitchell Hospitality Group will be pursuing civil action to recover the misappropriated funds, as well as damages to our reputation and business operations. I suggest you retain legal counsel immediately. As Morgan turned to leave, Palmer made one last desperate attempt. Wait, this isn't fair. I built this restaurant's reputation. The profit margins, the celebrity clientele, the press coverage, that was all me. Michael can't just throw me away after everything I've done." Morgan paused at the door. "Mr. Mitchell didn't make this decision, Mr. Palmer. You did when you chose to steal from the company and assault his daughter. The consequences are entirely of your own making." The door closed behind her with a quiet finality, leaving Palmer alone with the security officers and the shattered remains of his career. In the main dining room, Sarah Mitchell observed the restaurant operations from a corner table. The mark on her cheek had been expertly concealed with makeup, though several staff members still glanced at her with concerned expressions. Word had spread quickly throughout the establishment. The waitress who had been assaulted was actually the owner's daughter, conducting an undercover evaluation. The revelation had transformed the atmosphere, creating a strange mixture of anxiety and relief among the staff. Tom Wilson approached her table, his posture reflecting his newly appointed status as interim general manager. At 53, his salt and pepper hair and dignified bearing gave him the perfect appearance for Pinnacle's upscale clientele. More importantly, his 25 years of service had earned him the respect of both staff and regular patrons. "Miss Mitchell, may I join you for a moment?" Sarah gestured to the chair across from her. "Of course, Tom. And please call me Sarah." Wilson sat carefully arranging his thoughts. The staff is understandably concerned about what happens next. There are rumors circulating about a complete restructuring, possible layoffs. Sarah nodded, understanding their anxiety. "Please assure everyone that our goal is improvement, not punishment. The issues at Pinnacle are primarily management and systemic problems, not staff performance." She paused, taking a sip of water. "That said, there will be changes. My assessment revealed significant issues that extend beyond Palmer's behavior. We'll be implementing new reporting structures, transparent accounting practices, and comprehensive staff protection policies." Wilson seemed to weigh his next words carefully. "If I may speak frankly, this hasn't been an isolated problem. Over the past few years, I've watched Pinnacle's culture deteriorate. Palmer created an environment of fear where reporting issues meant risking your position." "I know." Sarah's expression softened with genuine concern. "And I owe you an apology, Tom. We should have acted sooner. The company failed its responsibilities to the staff here." "Why now?" Wilson asked. "There have been complaints before." Sarah considered how much to reveal, deciding that transparency was essential for rebuilding trust. Several factors converged. First, the financial irregularities triggered internal alarms. Then 3 former employees filed formal complaints with detailed documentation of abuse. But the catalyst was Elena Martinez. "Martinez?" Wilson looked surprised. "Our server. She worked at another Mitchell property before transferring to Pinnacle a year ago. During her previous position, she formed a connection with my father, who occasionally worked incognito as a server to stay connected to the business. When she experienced similar problems here, she reached out directly to him using a private number he'd given her." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "Her documentation was comprehensive and disturbing enough that my father finally agreed we needed direct intervention, hence my undercover assignment." Wilson nodded, slowly processing this information. "I should have done more, spoken up earlier. You did what you could in a difficult situation." Sarah reached across the table, briefly touching his hand in reassurance. "And when the moment came, you made the right call by contacting my father. That's why he trusts you to lead during this transition." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jack Stone, who approached the table with the casual confidence of someone comfortable in any environment. Despite his intimidating appearance, his movements carried a graceful economy that spoke of disciplined physical power. "Miss Mitchell, your father asked me to inform you that Palmer has been escorted from the building." Sarah nodded. "Thank you, Jack. And please thank your men for their assistance today." Jack remained standing, his weathered face impassive. "Thunder Road protects its own. Your father was our president for 15 years. That makes you family regardless of whether you wear our colors." There was something in his tone that suggested a deeper history, a connection that transcended the current situation. Sarah studied him for a moment, recognizing the same unwavering loyalty that characterized her father's closest associates. "My father mentioned you were instrumental in his transition from club president to businessman. He says he wouldn't have his empire without your support during those early years." A ghost of a smile crossed Jack's face. Michael has always given me too much credit. He was destined for greater things than running a motorcycle club. I just helped clear some obstacles. The understated comment carried implications that Sarah understood perfectly. Her father's rise from street-level enforcer to legitimate businessman hadn't been without complications. The early financing for his first restaurant had come from sources that wouldn't appear on any official documents, and the transition had required delicate handling of former associates who might have resented his departure. Nevertheless, we're grateful for your continued friendship. She gestured to the chair beside Wilson. Please join us. We could use your perspective. Jack sat with the careful movements of someone nursing old injuries accumulated through decades of hard living. My perspective tends to be straightforward, possibly too direct for corporate settings. Directness is exactly what we need right now. Sarah leaned forward, her expression earnest. Pinnacle is just the beginning. Based on what I've found here and reports from other properties, I believe we're facing systemic problems throughout the organization. Wilson looked concerned. How widespread? At least 8 other restaurants show similar patterns of financial irregularities and staff complaints. Palmer isn't an isolated case. He's a symptom of a culture that's lost its way. Jack's expression remained neutral, though his eyes narrowed slightly. Your father built this company on respect both for customers and employees. That was his code even in his Thunder Road days. Yes, and somewhere along the way, that foundation eroded. Sarah's voice carried the passion of someone confronting an unwelcome truth about a family legacy. As we expanded, added more properties, and focused on growth, the original values became diluted. Management positions were filled based on revenue generation rather than character and leadership. Wilson nodded with sad recognition. Palmer was promoted because he consistently delivered the highest profit margins in the group, not because he embodied our values. Exactly. Sarah opened her tablet, displaying a series of charts and graphs. I've been analyzing the correlation between management complaints and financial performance across all 37 properties. The pattern is clear. Establishments with the highest reported profit margins also have the highest staff turnover rates, lowest employee satisfaction scores, and most customer complaints. Jack studied the data with surprising acuity. They're cooking the books and burning out the staff to inflate their performance metrics. Sarah looked impressed. That's precisely what's happening. Cost-cutting measures that look impressive on quarterly reports but devastate long-term sustainability. Their discussion was interrupted by Elena Martinez, who approached the table with visible nervousness. At 24, she carried herself with the cautious demeanor of someone who had learned to navigate hostile environments through careful observation and strategic invisibility. Excuse me, Ms. Mitchell. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you asked to be notified when everyone had gathered in the private dining room. Thank you, Elena. Sarah stood gathering her materials. And please, I meant what I said earlier. Call me Sarah. Martinez nodded, though her expression suggested this familiarity with the owner's daughter would take time to feel natural. They're all waiting, including the kitchen staff. Mr. Mitchell thought it was important for everyone to hear directly from both of you. He's right. Sarah turned to Wilson and Jack. Gentlemen, shall we? As they walked through the restaurant, Sarah noticed the subtle shift in atmosphere. Staff members who had previously moved with anxious efficiency now displayed a cautious optimism. Word had spread quickly that Palmer's reign had ended, and while uncertainty about the future remained, there was palpable relief that the immediate threat had been removed. The private dining room had been arranged to accommodate the entire staff. Servers, bartenders, kitchen personnel, and support staff stood in a loose semicircle around Michael Mitchell, who was engaged in quiet conversation with the executive chef. At 68, Michael still commanded immediate respect, his imposing physical presence, enhanced by the subtle authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The room fell silent as Sarah entered, all eyes turning to the woman whose undercover work had precipitated the day's dramatic events. She moved to stand beside her father, conscious of the symbolic importance of presenting a united front. Michael surveyed the assembled staff, his expression serious but not unkind. Thank you all for joining us, especially those of you who should be preparing for dinner service. We'll be brief, but what we have to say is important. He paused, making eye contact with several longtime employees. First, I want to apologize to each of you. The situation that developed under Richard Palmer's management represents a failure not just of leadership, but of the values this company was founded upon. That failure extends all the way to my office, and for that I am truly sorry. The frank admission seemed to surprise many staff members who exchanged glances of astonishment. Michael Mitchell's reputation as a demanding perfectionist made such public acknowledgement of error remarkable. Some of you have worked at Pinnacle for many years, and remember when I was personally involved in daily operations. In those days, I knew every employee by name, understood their challenges, and ensured they were treated with the respect they deserved. As we expanded, I became disconnected from that foundation, focusing on growth at the expense of culture. He gestured to Sarah. My daughter's assessment has revealed that this disconnect has created serious problems throughout our organization, problems that we are now committed to addressing comprehensively. I'll let her explain our immediate plans for Pinnacle. Sarah stepped forward, her professional demeanor tempered with genuine empathy. The events today represent a turning point, not just for Pinnacle, but for the entire Mitchell Hospitality Group. Effective immediately, Tom Wilson will serve as interim general manager while we implement significant structural changes. She indicated Wilson, who stood straighter under the collective gaze. These changes will include a new anonymous reporting system, direct access to corporate human resources for all staff members, revised compensation structures, and transparent performance metrics that value staff retention and satisfaction as highly as financial performance. Martinez raised her hand hesitantly. What about those of us who reported problems before? Will there be any retaliation to worry about? The question hung in the air, voicing the fear that many clearly shared. Sarah addressed it directly. Absolutely not. In fact, we're establishing a staff advocacy committee with representation from all departments. Elena, I'd like to invite you to serve as the inaugural chair, given your courage in bringing these issues forward. The young woman's eyes widened with surprise. Me? But I'm just a server. There is no just about any position in this organization. Michael interjected, his voice firm. Every role is essential to our success, and every voice deserves to be heard. Your willingness to speak truth to power at personal risk demonstrates exactly the character we need to rebuild our culture. A murmur of approval spread through the staff, many of whom had witnessed Martinez's previous mistreatment under Palmer's management. The symbolic elevation of someone from their ranks to a position of influence sent a powerful message about the changes being implemented. Sarah continued outlining the immediate transitions, including temporary management structures, enhanced security protocols, and a comprehensive financial audit. She emphasized that the restaurant would remain open throughout the process, maintaining its commitment to excellence while rebuilding its internal culture. I know change creates uncertainty, she concluded, but I ask for your patience and participation as we work to create the kind of organization we can all be proud of. My contact information will be available to everyone, and I welcome your direct input as we move forward. As the meeting concluded, staff members dispersed to prepare for the evening service, many lingering to speak privately with Sarah Wilson or the executive chef. The atmosphere had transformed from anxious uncertainty to cautious optimism, the first indication that recovery was possible. Michael observed the interactions with approval before turning to Jack. Walk with me, old friend. There are matters we should discuss privately. The two men moved through the kitchen toward Michael's private office at the rear of the restaurant, a space rarely used since he had become less involved in day-to-day operations. Unlike Palmer's modern minimalist office, Michael's retained the old-world elegance of a different era, with leather-bound books lining the walls and a massive mahogany desk that had witnessed the signing of his first restaurant lease 30 years earlier. Some things never change, Jack commented as Michael closed the door behind them. You still keep the good whiskey in the bottom drawer? Michael smiled for the first time that day, moving to the antique cabinet behind his desk. Some traditions are worth preserving. He retrieved a bottle of Macallan 25 and 2 crystal tumblers, pouring a generous measure into each before handing one to Jack. They raised their glasses in silent acknowledgement before drinking, neither man feeling the need to fill the comfortable silence with unnecessary words. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice reflecting the weight of the day's events. I've gotten soft, Jack. Lost touch with what's happening on the ground. Jack considered this, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. You built something legitimate, Michael. Something your daughter can inherit without shame. That was always the goal. At what cost, though? I let men like Palmer corrupt what we built because they delivered the numbers I wanted to see. Michael stared into his whiskey as if seeking answers in its amber depths. I became exactly the kind of absentee owner I despised when we were younger. Perhaps, Jack acknowledged, but you're fixing it now. That counts for something. Michael studied his old friend, the last remaining connection to his former life. While he had transformed himself into a respected businessman, Jack had remained true to their original path, becoming Thunder Road's president and maintaining the code that had once defined both their lives. Sarah doesn't know everything about the early days, Michael said, after another moment of silence, about how we really funded the first restaurant or the arrangements we made with certain parties to secure prime locations. Jack shrugged. She doesn't need to know. That world is behind you. Is it? Because today, when I saw that mark on her face, I wanted to handle Palmer the old way. Michael's expression darkened with the memory. For a moment, I wasn't the successful restaurateur or the respected businessman. I was back on 10th Avenue ready to enforce consequences personally. But you didn't, Jack pointed out. You handled it legitimately through proper channels. That's the difference between who you were and who you've become. Michael nodded, acknowledging the truth in Jack's assessment. Speaking of proper channels, there's another matter we need to address. The forensic audit has uncovered connections between Palmer and the Costello family. Jack's expression sharpened, his casual demeanor instantly replaced by focused attention. Vincent Costello's organization? I thought they'd been pushed out of Manhattan years ago. Apparently, they've been making inroads back into the restaurant business. Our preliminary investigation suggests Palmer was laundering money through vendor relationships with several shell companies connected to Costello Enterprises. Jack considered the implications, his mind working through the potential complications. Does Sarah know? Not yet, Michael sighed heavily. I've kept her insulated from that aspect of New York business. She understands there are complicated relationships in the industry, but not the specific history between Thunder Road and the Costello family. The history in question dated back 30 years to the territorial disputes that had defined New York's underground economy during Michael's tenure as Thunder Road's president. The peace that had allowed him to transition to legitimate business had been secured through carefully negotiated arrangements and occasionally more direct methods when negotiation failed. Vincent won't be happy when Palmer's operation is shut down, Jack observed. He might view it as a deliberate move against his interests, which is why I need your help. Michael leaned forward, his expression intensely focused. Sarah's investigation has opened a door we can't close. The financial audit will inevitably expose the Costello connections. When that happens, I need assurance that Thunder Road will provide additional security for our properties, particularly for Sarah. Jack didn't hesitate. Consider it done. I'll assign our most reliable members to watch over her personally. No one will get close enough to cause problems. Thank you. Michael's gratitude was evident. I've worked too hard to build this legacy for my daughter, only to have old ghosts threaten her safety. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Elizabeth Morgan entered, her expression suggesting urgent developments. Excuse the interruption, Mr. Mitchell, but there's something you need to see immediately. She placed her tablet on the desk, displaying a local news website. The headline made Michael's expression darken further. Exclusive, high-end restaurant manager arrested for assault and financial crimes. It's already hit the news cycle, Elizabeth explained. Palmer was taken into custody by federal agents as he left the building. Someone tipped off a reporter who captured video of the arrest. It's trending on social media, and major outlets are picking up the story. Michael scanned the article quickly, noting the carefully worded statements that avoided direct libelous claims while clearly identifying Pinnacle as the establishment in question. We need to get ahead of this narrative. He turned to Elizabeth. Prepare a press statement acknowledging the situation, emphasizing our cooperation with authorities and our commitment to staff welfare. Coordinate with PR to arrange an exclusive interview with a friendly outlet where Sarah and I can address the changes we're implementing. Elizabeth nodded, making notes on her tablet. The legal team is concerned about potential class action suits from former employees who experienced similar treatment under Palmer's management. We've identified at least 27 individuals with potentially actionable claims. Don't fight them. Michael's decision was immediate. Create a compensation fund with independent oversight. Make it clear we're acknowledging past failures and making substantive amends. I want this handled with integrity, not legal maneuvering. Jack watched this exchange with quiet admiration. The Michael he had known 30 years earlier would have responded to threats with intimidation and force. This Michael wielded corporate policy and public relations with equal strategic precision. There's another matter, Elizabeth continued. Elena Martinez has provided documentation suggesting similar abusive patterns at 3 other properties. The managers in question appear to have been personally selected and mentored by Palmer. Suspend them immediately pending investigation. Michael's tone left no room for debate. Full pay but no access to staff or systems until we've conducted thorough assessments. Elizabeth nodded, making additional notes. Finally, the FBI has requested an interview with you tomorrow regarding Palmer's financial activities and potential connections to organized crime entities. At this, Jack and Michael exchanged significant glances, both understanding the delicate territory they were approaching. Schedule it at corporate headquarters with full legal representation. Michael responded smoothly. We'll cooperate fully with their investigation of Palmer's activities while maintaining appropriate boundaries regarding historical matters. As Elizabeth departed to implement these directives, Michael turned back to Jack, their private conversation resuming with new urgency. The federal investigation complicates things considerably. Michael's voice had dropped to ensure privacy. They may dig deep enough to uncover connections that extend beyond Palmer's recent activities. Jack nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. How much does Sarah know about the original financing for Mitchell Hospitality Group? The sanitized version, initial investment from private equity partners, strategic loans from development funds. Michael rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of past decisions. She knows there were unconventional arrangements in the early days, but not the specific details. Perhaps it's time she learned the complete history, Jack suggested carefully. Better from you than from federal investigators or news reports. Michael considered this, his expression troubled. You may be right. She's proven herself more than capable of handling difficult truths. I just wanted to protect her from that part of our past. She's stronger than you give her credit for, Jack observed. I saw how she handled herself today. Sarah has your strategic mind, but a composure you never possessed. She didn't flinch when Palmer struck. Her didn't lose control when she had every right to retaliate. Michael smiled with genuine pride. She's better than I ever was. More disciplined, more principled. Then trust her with the truth, Jack advised. All of it, including Thunder Road's role in building this empire and the compromises you made along the way. Their conversation was interrupted by another knock. Sarah entered, her composed demeanor slightly frayed after hours of intense management. Dad, we need to talk about Martinez's documentation. She's been collecting evidence for months, including recordings of Palmer discussing financial arrangements with several vendors. She paused, noticing Jack's presence. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting. Michael gestured for her to join them. In fact, we were just discussing matters that directly concern you and the future of the company. Sarah took the seat beside Jack, studying both men with perceptive intensity. This is about more than Palmer, isn't it? The financial investigation has uncovered connections to something bigger. Michael exchanged another glance with Jack before making his decision. Yes, and it's time you understood the complete history of how Mitchell Hospitality Group came into existence, not just the version that appears in our corporate literature. Sarah's expression revealed nothing beyond focused attention, but her posture straightened subtly, preparing for revelations she had long suspected might exist. I'm listening, she said simply. Michael began the difficult process of unraveling 3 decades of carefully constructed narrative, revealing the complex and sometimes troubling foundation upon which their current success had been built. As the story unfolded, Sarah listened without judgment, occasionally asking precise questions that demonstrated her quick grasp of the implications. The 3 remained sequestered in the office as the evening fell over Manhattan, the restaurant above them returning to its normal rhythm under Wilson's capable guidance. In that quiet space beneath Pinnacle's glittering dining room, the past and future of the Mitchell legacy converged, creating an unexpected alliance between worlds that had seemed irrevocably separated. Outside, Palmer was being processed at the federal building, the first threads of his carefully constructed life unraveling under scrutiny. Across the city in an upscale Little Italy restaurant, Vincent Costello received word of his associate's arrest, his weathered face betraying nothing as he contemplated the potential disruption to operations that had taken years to establish. And throughout the Mitchell restaurant empire, ripples of change began spreading from property to property as suspensions were announced and accounts frozen and investigations launched. The single act of defiance that had triggered this cascade, a moment of unchecked arrogance from a man who believed himself untouchable, had set in motion transformations that would ultimately reach far beyond a single restaurant or company. As night descended on the city, power shifted in subtle but significant ways. The careful balance of interests that defined Manhattan's complex ecosystem adjusting to accommodate new realities. Thunder Road members took up discrete positions around Mitchell properties. The old alliance between Michael's past and present lives reactivated in response to emerging threats. In the private dining room, Sarah concluded her meeting with the staff committee, their faces reflecting cautious hope as they dispersed to their stations. The undercover waitress had become a catalyst for change, her presence revealing truths that could no longer be ignored. The transformation had begun. 3 weeks after the incident at Pinnacle, a different Richard Palmer sat in an austere visitor's room at the Metropolitan Detention Center. Gone was the Armani suit, replaced by standard-issue khaki. The Rolex and diamond tie clip had been confiscated, along with all other personal effects, leaving his wrist naked and pale. Only the shadow of his former arrogance remained visible in the stiff set of his shoulders as he waited for his visitor. The investigation had moved with surprising speed, financial crimes specialists uncovering layer after layer of sophisticated fraud. Palmer's meticulous nature, which had once made him an effective manager, had also created a detailed paper trail of his criminal activities. Every transaction had been recorded, every contact documented in encrypted files he believed would never be discovered. The door opened, admitting Michael Mitchell. Without his bespoke suit and Italian leather shoes, Michael might have been mistaken for any successful businessman in his 60s, but the watchful respect of the corrections officers revealed his continued status and influence, even in this controlled environment. "Richard?" Michael acknowledged Palmer, with a slight nod, taking the seat opposite him. Palmer straightened, attempting to project confidence he no longer possessed. 3 weeks in federal custody had stripped away much of his carefully cultivated persona, revealing the desperate man beneath. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." Michael's voice remained neutral, neither accusatory nor sympathetic. "But we have unfinished business that needs resolution." Palmer leaned forward, lowering his voice, though they both knew the room was monitored. "I can explain everything. The financial arrangements were more complicated than they appear. Many of those transactions were authorized through informal channels." Michael studied the man who had once been one of his most trusted managers. "No, Richard, they weren't. We've reviewed every document, every communication. The embezzlement was systematic, deliberate, and entirely your initiative. But the Costello connections," Palmer began before Michael cut him off with a sharp gesture, "are precisely why I'm here." Michael's tone hardened. "Your unauthorized arrangements with Vincent Costello's organization have created complications that extend far beyond financial crimes." The mention of Costello caused Palmer to pale visibly. During his rise through restaurant management, he had been approached by representatives of the Costello family offering mutually beneficial arrangements. What had begun as occasional cash payments for preferential reservations had evolved into more complex money laundering operations, using the restaurant's high cash volume to clean significant sums. "That wasn't my idea," Palmer protested. "They approached me, offered substantial incentives. I was told it was standard practice in high-end Manhattan establishments." "You were told incorrectly." Michael's expression remained impassive. "More importantly, you failed to disclose these arrangements to corporate management, creating potential legal exposure for the entire organization." Palmer recognized the shift in Michael's demeanor. This wasn't the visit of a concerned former employer, but something more calculated. "What do you want from me?" "Complete cooperation." Michael placed a document on the table between them. "This is a cooperation agreement prepared by our legal team in conjunction with federal prosecutors. In exchange for your full and truthful testimony regarding all Costello family activities connected to Mitchell properties, you'll receive certain considerations." "What kind of considerations?" The company will not pursue civil damages for the embezzled funds. Our attorneys will recommend leniency to federal prosecutors based on your cooperation. And most importantly, you'll receive certain protective arrangements both during your incarceration and afterward. The implication was clear. Without Mitchell's protection, Palmer would be extremely vulnerable both in prison and upon release. The Costello organization did not look kindly upon those who revealed their operations to authorities. "Why would you help me after what happened?" Palmer asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Michael's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. "This isn't about helping you, Richard. It's about protecting my company and family from collateral damage. Your poor decisions have created a situation that requires careful management." Palmer studied the agreement, his options narrowing with each passing day in custody. The federal case against him was overwhelming, with potential sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. Without cooperation, his future looked bleak indeed. "What exactly would I need to testify about?" "Everything." Michael's response was immediate. "All contacts, payment arrangements, money laundering protocols, shell company structures. Every detail of your interaction with Costello representatives over the past 7 years." Palmer considered this, weighing his deteriorating options. "And if I sign this, you'll ensure my safety?" "To the extent possible, yes. Thunder Road maintains certain relationships within the correctional system. You would be placed in protected custody with additional oversight from trusted individuals." The mention of Thunder Road startled Palmer, who had never connected Michael Mitchell with the motorcycle club despite rumors about his past. "You still have influence with them?" A ghost of a smile crossed Michael's face. "There are some bonds that never break, Richard. Loyalty means something in certain circles, a concept you might have benefited from understanding earlier." Palmer picked up the document, reading through the detailed terms. His lawyer had advised him that cooperation represented his only viable path forward, but he had hesitated, fearing Costello's retribution more than extended prison time. Mitchell's offer of protection changed that calculation significantly. "I'll need to consult my attorney," Palmer finally said. Michael stood, signaling the conclusion of their meeting. "You have 24 hours to decide. After that, the offer is withdrawn and you face both legal proceedings and other consequences entirely on your own." As Michael departed, Palmer remained seated, staring at the document that represented his only pathway to eventual freedom. The manager who had once controlled one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants with dictatorial authority now found himself powerless, his future dependent entirely on the mercy of others. Across Manhattan, Sarah Mitchell stood at the window of her father's penthouse office, studying the skyline that had defined her childhood. From 40 stories up, the city appeared ordered and manageable, a stark contrast to the complex human enterprises it contained. 3 weeks of intensive work had begun transforming the Mitchell Hospitality Group, but each resolution seemed to uncover new challenges, deeper institutional problems that required fundamental restructuring. The door opened as Elizabeth Morgan entered, carrying a leather portfolio. At 45, the attorney moved with the confident precision of someone accustomed to navigating complex legal and corporate environments. "The staff interviews are complete," Elizabeth reported, placing the portfolio on Michael's desk. "We've documented 117 incidents of workplace harassment across 23 properties, including 34 that potentially rise to the level of actionable offenses." Sarah turned from the window, her expression somber. "Worse than we anticipated." "Unfortunately, yes. The pattern suggests a systemic failure of oversight, particularly in establishments managed by Palmer protégés." Elizabeth opened the portfolio, revealing meticulously organized documentation. "The compensation fund structure has been finalized with independent administration and confidential claims processing. Initial letters to affected current and former employees will go out tomorrow." "And the management changes?" Sarah asked, moving to review the documents. 17 managers have been suspended pending investigation. 4 have already resigned rather than face review. Tom Wilson has assembled a transition team of veteran employees with proven ethical records to maintain operations during this period. Sarah nodded approval, studying the organizational charts Elizabeth had prepared. The restructuring represented the most significant change in the company's 30-year history, a fundamental reimagining of how power and accountability flowed through the organization. "What about the Costello situation?" Sarah's question addressed the most delicate aspect of their current challenges. Elizabeth glanced toward the closed door before responding, her voice lower. Your father is meeting with Palmer today. If he secures his cooperation, federal prosecutors believe they can build a significant case against Costello's money laundering operation without directly implicating Mitchell Hospitality Group in prior activities. This careful phrasing acknowledged the reality that Sarah had recently come to understand. While her father had built a legitimate business empire, certain compromises had been made during the early years. Compromises that could potentially create legal exposure if examined too closely by federal authorities. In Thunder Road's involvement, Sarah had been surprised to learn of her father's continued connection to the motorcycle club, though in retrospect it explained many aspects of his business approach she had previously found puzzling. Jack Stone has provided additional security personnel at all key properties. They're operating discreetly but effectively. Elizabeth's tone remained professional, though the arrangement clearly fell outside normal corporate security protocols. Federal authorities have been advised that we've enhanced security due to threats received following Palmer's arrest, which is technically accurate if incomplete. The delicate dance between full disclosure and necessary discretion had characterized much of the past 3 weeks. Sarah had absorbed the complete history of her family's business, including aspects her father had previously shielded her from. The education had been sometimes painful but ultimately necessary, providing context for decisions that now fell increasingly to her as Michael stepped back from day-to-day operations. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, Elizabeth continued. All members have received the briefing materials outlining the restructuring plan and compliance enhancements. We anticipate questions regarding the financial impact, but the projections suggest minimal disruption to overall performance once the transition is complete. Sarah had spent days preparing for this critical presentation, knowing that some board members, particularly those from traditional hospitality backgrounds, might resist changes they viewed as unnecessarily disruptive. Her father would be present to provide support, but the initiative was clearly hers, a public transfer of authority that would define the company's future direction. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Jack Stone entered his imposing presence, somewhat softened by the casual business attire he had adopted for his official role as security consultant to Mitchell Hospitality Group. Sorry to interrupt. Jack nodded respectfully to both women. Just got word that Michael is on his way back from the detention center. The meeting with Palmer went as planned. Sarah gestured for him to join them. Did he agree to cooperate? Not yet. Jack's weathered face revealed nothing of his thoughts. Michael gave him 24 hours to decide. Based on my contacts inside, Palmer is consulting with his attorney now. The general feeling is he'll sign. Elizabeth gathered her materials. I should prepare for that possibility. We'll need to coordinate with federal prosecutors regarding testimony parameters and protection arrangements. As she departed, Jack moved to the window position that Sarah had occupied earlier, his gaze tracking movement on the surrounding streets with the habitual vigilance of someone accustomed to identifying threats before they materialized. You're worried about Costello's response, Sarah observed, joining him at the window. Jack considered his words carefully. Vincent Costello is old school. He values business relationships but responds decisively to perceived betrayal. If Palmer testifies, there will be consequences. Which is why we have Thunder Road providing additional security. Sarah stated this as fact rather than question. Among other arrangements, Jack's tone suggested deeper preparations that existed outside official channels. Your father built this company with certain understandings about territorial boundaries and operational respect. Those understandings have generally been honored for 3 decades. Sarah studied the man who represented her father's complicated past. At 52, Jack Stone had spent his entire adult life within Thunder Road, rising through its ranks to eventually succeed Michael as president. The two men maintained a connection that transcended conventional business relationships, a bond forged through shared experiences and mutual loyalty that neither time nor changing circumstances had diminished. Can those understandings survive this situation? She asked directly. Jack turned to face her, his expression revealing a hint of approval at her straightforward approach. That depends on how we handle the next few weeks. Costello isn't unreasonable. He's a businessman, albeit in different sectors than your father now operates. He understands that Palmer created this situation through his own recklessness. But he'll still expect consequences. Yes, The question is where those consequences fall. If we can contain the damage to Palmer and his immediate associates while maintaining the broader understandings that have preserved peace, Costello may accept the new equilibrium. Sarah considered this, weighing complex ethical and practical considerations. Her father had shared the unvarnished history of his rise from Thunder Road president to respected businessman, including certain arrangements that existed in gray areas between legitimate and shadow economies. While technically no longer directly connected to those worlds, the boundaries had always been more permeable than the company's official narrative suggested. I need your honest assessment, Jack. Can we rebuild this company with genuine integrity while still honoring those historical understandings? Jack studied her with newfound respect. It was precisely the question Michael would have asked, demonstrating Sarah's grasp of the fundamental challenge they faced. Yes, his response came without hesitation. Your father navigated that transition successfully. The key is transparency within the appropriate circles, combined with absolute discretion in others. Integrity doesn't require destroying functional relationships. It simply demands that new engagements proceed on legitimate terms. Their conversation was interrupted by Michael's arrival. At 68, he moved with the slight stiffness of age, though his imposing presence remained undiminished. The meeting with Palmer had clearly taken a toll, his expression reflecting the complicated emotions of confronting a trusted employee's betrayal. Palmer will sign, Michael stated without preamble. His attorney called Elizabeth while I was en route. They're prepared to provide complete cooperation regarding Costello's operations. Jack nodded as if this confirmed his own assessment. I'll make the necessary arrangements for his protection. Costello will know within hours, possibly minutes. Then we should accelerate the security enhancements at all properties, Sarah suggested, particularly at Pinnacle and the other restaurants most closely associated with Palmer's activities. Michael moved to his desk, reviewing the documents Elizabeth had left behind. Agreed. Jack, please coordinate with Wilson to ensure coverage is in place before tonight's dinner service. I want additional personnel at Sarah's residence as well. She started to protest, but Michael raised his hand. This isn't negotiable. Until the situation stabilizes, we take maximum precautions. Sarah recognized the shift in her father's demeanor, the emergence of the authoritative figure who had once commanded respect through more direct methods than corporate titles. She nodded acceptance, knowing this battle wasn't worth fighting. The board presentation is ready for tomorrow. She redirected the conversation to immediate business concerns. Elizabeth has prepared comprehensive documentation for the restructuring plan, including financial projections and implementation timelines. Michael studied her with evident pride. You've accomplished more in 3 weeks than most executives manage in a year. The organization is responding well to your leadership. Our leadership, Sarah corrected. Your continued presence has been essential, particularly with the old guard managers. They respect me, but they fear disappointing you. A smile touched Michael's face. Fear has its uses in transitional periods, but it's not sustainable. Respect built on demonstrated competence lasts longer. You're establishing that foundation now, even with those who initially resisted your authority. Jack observed this exchange with quiet approval. The Mitchell legacy would continue, though, in evolved forms, Sarah bringing her own strengths to the foundation her father had established. The integration of past and future represented the most successful type of transition, one that honored historical strengths while adapting to changing realities. I should go. Jack moved toward the door. Need to coordinate the additional security deployments before evening service begins. As he departed, Michael turned his full attention to Sarah. How are you really doing? These past weeks have contained revelations that might have overwhelmed someone with less strength. Sarah considered the question, understanding it addressed more than just business concerns. Learning the complete truth about her family's history, including her father's early years with Thunder Road, had fundamentally altered her understanding of both her father and the empire he had built. Honestly, I'm still processing certain aspects. But I understand now why you made the choices you did both then and later when you chose to shield me from particular realities. Michael nodded, accepting this measured response. I wanted you to inherit a legitimate enterprise untainted by its origins. Perhaps that was naive. Not naive, just protective. Sarah's expression softened. But I'm not a child anymore, Dad. I can't effectively lead this organization without understanding its complete history, including the complex relationships that continue to influence our operations. No, you can't, Michael acknowledged, which is why, despite my reservations, I've authorized Jack to share anything you need to know about Thunder Road's historical connections to our business. Some knowledge comes with burdens, but in your position, ignorance would be more dangerous. Sarah recognized the significance of this authorization. Her father was officially transferring not just corporate authority, but the deeper responsibilities that came with leadership, including management of relationships that would never appear on any organizational chart. I'll use that knowledge judiciously, she promised. And speaking of knowledge, you should review the proposed statement for tomorrow's board meeting. We're recommending full disclosure of Palmer's activities with appropriate legal protections, of course. Michael accepted the document she offered, scanning it with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to absorbing complex information quickly. This is quite comprehensive. The board will have concerns about potential reputational damage, which is why we're positioning it as proactive corporate responsibility. We discovered misconduct, took immediate action, cooperated fully with authorities, and implemented systematic reforms to prevent recurrence. Sarah outlined the strategies she had developed with Elizabeth. The narrative emphasizes our commitment to ethical operations and employee welfare. Michael nodded approval. Well constructed. This approach addresses the immediate situation while establishing foundations for the broader cultural changes you're implementing. Their strategy session continued into the evening, father and daughter working in seamless cooperation, each bringing complementary strengths to the challenges they faced. Outside Manhattan continued its eternal rhythm, unaware of the significant shifts occurring within one of its most prestigious hospitality groups. 1 month later, Tom Wilson stood in Pinnacle's main dining room, observing the evening service with quiet satisfaction. The restaurant had not only survived the turbulence following Palmer's arrest, but emerged stronger. Staff moved with confident efficiency, a new sense of ownership and pride evident in their interactions with guests and each other. Everything looks excellent, Tom. Rebecca Thompson approached, having completed her inspection of the kitchen facilities. At 47, the new permanent general manager brought decades of hospitality experience, combined with a management philosophy that emphasized staff development and ethical leadership. The new service protocols are working seamlessly. Wilson nodded agreement. The team has embraced the changes completely. Employee satisfaction scores are at record levels, and customer reviews have actually improved despite the initial publicity challenges. Speaking of publicity, Thompson gestured toward a corner table where Sarah Mitchell sat with a journalist from a prestigious restaurant industry publication. That interview should help solidify our rebuilding narrative. The article in progress represented the culmination of Mitchell Hospitality Group's carefully managed response to the Palmer scandal. After initial disclosure, comprehensive reforms, and demonstrated commitment to change, they were now sharing their journey toward organizational transformation as a model for the broader industry. Ms. Thompson, your expertise in the kitchen is requested. The executive chef approached with respectful urgency. We're preparing the special tasting menu for Table 7 and would value your input on the presentation. As Thompson departed to address this matter, Wilson continued his circuit of the restaurant. The physical space remained largely unchanged, its elegant design and spectacular views still drawing Manhattan's elite. But the underlying culture had transformed fundamentally from Palmer's environment of fear and intimidation to Thompson's collaborative leadership approach. Elena Martinez approached Wilson, her demeanor reflecting her recent promotion to service manager. At 24, she had demonstrated remarkable leadership abilities, once freed from Palmer's oppressive management. Mr. Wilson, the Thunder Road party has arrived. They're asking if their usual alcove is available. Of course, Wilson smiled. Please escort them personally and ensure they receive our best service. Martinez nodded, understanding the significance of these particular guests. The relationship between Thunder Road and the Mitchell organization remained one of the more unusual aspects of Pinnacle's operation, though under Thompson's management, it had been formalized through appropriate channels. The motorcycle club members now officially served as security consultants, their presence acknowledged through proper corporate structures. Jack Stone entered with 5 Thunder Road members, all dressed in the club's characteristic leather vests, though they had made concessions to Pinnacle's upscale environment by wearing collared shirts underneath. Martinez greeted them with professional courtesy, escorting the group to their preferred alcove, which offered both privacy and excellent sightlines to all restaurant entrances. Mr. Stone welcomed back to Pinnacle. Martinez's confidence had grown remarkably since Palmer's departure. "Can I start you with the usual beverages?" Jack nodded appreciation for her remembering their preferences. "Thank you, Elena, and congratulations on your promotion. It's well-deserved." This simple acknowledgement represented the new Pinnacle culture, where staff achievements were recognized and valued regardless of position or title. Martinez smiled genuinely before departing to arrange their drinks, leaving the Thunder Road members to settle into their space. Across the restaurant, Sarah concluded her interview with practiced efficiency, highlighting the company's commitment to ethical reform while acknowledging the painful lessons learned through the Palmer situation. The most important insight from this experience has been recognizing that financial success and ethical operations aren't competing priorities but essential companions. She explained to the journalist, "Our reformed metrics now evaluate leadership based on both performance indicators and staff welfare measures, creating accountability at all levels." The journalist nodded, making notes on her tablet. "And the practical impact on operations?" "Initially challenging but ultimately positive." Sarah gestured around the thriving restaurant. "After temporary disruption, we've seen improvement across all key indicators, including staff retention, customer satisfaction, and even profitability, once we adjusted for Palmer's fraudulent reporting." The interview continued, exploring specific reforms implemented throughout the Mitchell Hospitality Group. Sarah navigated the discussion with practiced skill, emphasizing forward-looking changes while acknowledging historical failures with appropriate transparency. As the journalist departed, Sarah remained at her table, taking a moment to observe the restaurant her father had built 3 decades earlier. Pinnacle had survived its greatest crisis, emerging with its reputation not just intact, but enhanced through the demonstration of corporate responsibility and ethical leadership. Her gaze met Jack Stone's across the room, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. The biker raised his glass in subtle salute, recognizing her role in preserving and strengthening her father's legacy. Sarah returned the gesture with a slight nod, appreciating the continued protection Thunder Road provided during this transitional period. Michael Mitchell entered the restaurant, moving through the space with the comfortable familiarity of someone returning home. At 68, he had reduced his operational involvement, allowing Sarah to assume primary leadership while remaining available for strategic guidance. The staff greeted him with genuine warmth and respect, demonstrating the enduring loyalty he had earned through decades of fair treatment and opportunity. He joined Sarah at her table, taking the seat across from her. "How did the interview go?" "Well, I think she seemed particularly interested in our reformed accountability structures and the staff advocacy committee." Sarah signaled a server for coffee. "The article should provide positive closure to this chapter." Michael nodded satisfaction. "You've handled this situation masterfully, from crisis to transformation. The board is impressed, particularly the old guard members who initially resisted change. They've come around because the results speak for themselves." Sarah shared the latest performance metrics on her tablet. "Every indicator is trending positive across all properties, even accounting for temporary disruption during the transition." Their conversation continued, encompassing both immediate operational matters and longer-term strategic directions. The natural rhythm of their interaction reflected their evolving partnership, Sarah increasingly taking the lead, while Michael provided context and perspective from his decades of experience. In the kitchen, staff worked with renewed purpose and pride, the toxic atmosphere of Palmer's regime replaced by Thompson's collaborative approach. Wilson moved through the space, offering guidance and support his promotion to corporate training director, ensuring that Pinnacle's transformed culture would be replicated throughout the organization. Across Manhattan, in a federal courtroom, Richard Palmer signed the final cooperation agreement, securing both a reduced sentence and protection during his incarceration. The former manager, who had ruled Pinnacle through intimidation and fear, now depended entirely on others for his very survival. His testimony would eventually lead to significant indictments against Costello organization members, though Vincent himself would remain insulated by layers of intermediaries. The repercussions of Palmer's actions continued to spread through Manhattan's restaurant scene, prompting industry-wide reflection on management practices and accountability. Several high-profile establishments implemented their own reforms proactively, seeking to avoid similar scandals, while trade publications highlighted the Mitchell approach as a model for ethical transformation. As evening descended on the city, Michael and Sarah concluded their meeting departing together through Pinnacle's main entrance. A discreet security detail maintained watchful presence, Thunder Road members blending with professional security staff in a seamless, protective arrangement that reflected the integration of Michael's past and present worlds. Jack Stone watched from the restaurant's windows as father and daughter entered the waiting vehicle. The outsider who had once existed on society's margins now served as guardian for one of Manhattan's most prestigious business families, an unexpected evolution that somehow felt entirely appropriate. The transformation was complete. What had begun with a moment of unchecked arrogance, a single slap delivered by a man who believed himself untouchable, had catalyzed fundamental change throughout an entire organization. Pinnacle stood stronger than before its renewed commitment to both excellence and integrity, ensuring that the Mitchell legacy would continue for generations to come. In the delicate ecosystem of Manhattan's high-end hospitality world, a new equilibrium had been established, one that honored the past while embracing a more principled future. The outsiders had become protectors. The vulnerable had found strength, and justice had been served through both legal channels and the more subtle mechanisms of power that continued to shape the city's complex human enterprises. The legacy endured, transformed but unbroken.